That's true, too. You can sit there, right.
He's married.
Or if you'd like, you can sit next to Jeff in case you do need the mic.
Okay, this is May 18th.
Kick him under the table. Like it works.
Why is it so dark?
Kicks all of us under the tables.
There's no flag.
Commissioner Bixson,
Here.
Commissioner Cohen,
Here?
Commissioner Data,
Present.
Vice Chair Hammond,
Here.
Commissioner Heritage, Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Marshall,
Here.
Chair Vogel,
Here.
Commissioner Williams. We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum. There's no flag, but do we?
No, there isn't.
Do we skip it, or do we
Yeah,
pledge
we
allegiance
skip it.
without a flag?
Skip
We
it.
skip the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the council.
Wait, whoa,
No,
whoa,
don't
Can
say
I hear
that.
that again?
Okay. Acceptance of the agenda.
Sorry.
I'm going to suggest that, now that I see this possibility of public comment, that we move the public comment to after 4A, and we move 4A up front, because Councilman Kors is here, and that will give us an opportunity to talk about the last city council meeting, and he'll be able to give us some information, and we can ask some questions, and then after that, we'll go back to the regular order of events. So I'm going to make that motion myself. Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
So now we have to actually approve the minutes, though, still. So does anyone have a
So
motion
moved.
to approve?
Second.
Okay, accepted. Okay, so we're moving all the items down now, and we're going to go to the first item, old business, which has to do with just discussing the last council meeting, which was the joint meeting where we made a presentation with respect to our recommendations for unfinanced capital projects and for the community projects. And I just want to make kind of a statement about process, which is, at that meeting, there was some conversation with council about some other ideas. It was not necessarily absolute direction, but it's sufficient ideas and information to warrant some thinking for the future and for the to him and to ask you to review the things that were discussed, and let's have a conversation about it.
That would be great. And thank you very much, Chairman Vogel. And thanks for having me, and thanks for the work in the meeting. So sort of three things I just wanted to mention. One, probably not as closely related, but it's tied to that meeting, is it really struck me after that meeting that we need to come up with sort of a plan, whether I work with you or someone else, on communication between the commission, the council subcommittee, and staff earlier in the process. So we're all sort of talking to each other, right? Because I think staff has their priority projects, but we haven't reviewed it yet before you're asked to recommend them. And so just figuring out how we can do that maybe earlier in the process and have some feedback back and forth, given budget time constraints, might be a good idea. So just something maybe you and I could initially start to work on and give some thought to. And I appreciate Chairman Vogel and Commissioner Hammond meeting with Councilmember Mills and I about the community projects piece of it earlier. So I do want to acknowledge that. But I think we all could actually figure out a different communication or a different way of working with the subcommittee, which I'm very happy to do as a member. So two things were brought up by me, and we discussed it somewhat at the meeting. So the first is infrastructure relating to homelessness and very low-income affordable housing. The situation, I think, and I think you were there last night, and several others, where we talked about it, was we have Roy's closing, so we're going to need another transitional housing facility, and hopefully one that we can keep open during the day The good news is Desert Healthcare District has committed $2 million to West Valley homeless programs, something the city and the subcommittee had initiated with them. And that's exciting. And there may be some money in this from them, especially around helping homeless individuals. But I guess the question I would have for the commission, without having a specific project in mind, is getting a sense of whether that's an appropriate use of Measure J and whether people think that is a priority in general. Not to go ahead and reprioritize, but if you do and council then wants to reprioritize, we at least have that and we could bring something back to you. On the low-income affordable housing, we have 600 units that are at risk that we already subsidize as a city. But we've been working on a project, and David Brinkman is here, who will present what they're doing, for very low-income housing, mostly house people who are presently homeless. And there's a funding gap in doing that. The tax credits have gone down just in concern about what the new tax plan that may come from the administration and Congress is. So I would, so those are the two sort of capital areas. One is sort of transitional housing, emergency shelter, and one is very low-income affordable housing that would help homeless individuals. The other issue I raised was the buzz. And I know that didn't originally come through Measure J, although that's where the fund comes from. And so what I had suggested is it might make sense, because I do think we should get your recommendations before we fund. Council has the right not to, right? And fund different things, but that's why we have the commission. So what I would suggest, and there's a new council that was here when the buzz started, was I think two questions. One, whether Measure J is the appropriate place for the buzz money to come from, if that fits under infrastructure, and I know it can be broader, but what you all think on that would be, I think, helpful for us. And two, to evaluate, if you're interested, then we could get a staff report on sort of what the buzz costs per person and give us your feedback on whether that's something that you think should continue to be funded out of Measure J. Again, I think for today it's more getting a sense so that when we do the budget, we can discuss it and then direct things back for your review. So those were sort of the 3 points I wanted to make.
Great. First of all, I would like to say that I love the idea that we meet not only in advance of making our recommendations, but much earlier in the year, because for those 5 years that we have worked, that would have been something that we would have all have liked, and so to hear it come from council is a great thing, and I'm sure everybody, speaking for everybody, more interaction than less, it's a great idea. I think that what I'd like to do in order to keep this fairly structured is to divide the two subjects one at a time. And the first one is this question that Councilman Corrs has asked about our opinion with respect to infrastructure, including the concepts of funding homelessness. So I thought maybe we could just go around, and then we'll do questions after, but if you have an opinion and would like to speak about it, why don't we just start with Commissioner Blixen and then just kind of go around and everybody take a turn. I'll go last.
Okay. I've asked a few neighbors about this problem, and the overwhelming majority thought that the homeless issue, although we are sympathetic to the problem, is not related to infrastructure, and it is not what the voters intended when they passed Measure J.
Commissioner Cohen?
The subject, it's on. The subject of the homeless was a surprise, and I'm so ambivalent about it because I think it's something that should be funded. I don't know that it's that appropriate for us to do it, especially at this point in time. If we know in advance, we have several million, we can devote the whole thing on the next go-around. But it's sort of difficult right now. If we all decide that we're going to do it, I'm not going to fret over it because it's a problem since I've lived here. Since Sunrise Park, no one would go in the library because it was filled with homeless. So it is something that needs to be done. I'd like to see a budget on how to do it.
Absolutely.
And the surprise of closing Roy's, which just adds to the problem.
Commissioner Dada?
Knowing that this is a election year, a month ago, a survey was conducted, and one of the questions was the number one issue the citizens are facing in the city of Palm Springs, and the homelessness ranked as number 47, which is the top. None of the other questions got that type of ranking. And knowing I'm in the tourism industry and run a very large hotel, it is a nightmare for us, not only the Hilton, but all the other hotels, and it is a recurring on a daily basis. We have to chase at least at the Hilton 2, if not 3, homeless people sleeping on the stairs, sleeping in the corridors. And we do get in our surveys from our customers. And knowing that Measure J is dependent on all the revenues generated by the tourists, in my opinion, that's a huge issue. And it is directly related to Measure J. And any funding coming from Measure J would be a plus, 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 and knowing this is a number one issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Hammond?
My household has been a fairly active participant in issues related to homeless, including as members of the board on the Friends of Roy's, and prior to that, Sly was on the Homeless Task Force for a number of years. And so I'm just saying that because this is something that we support personally, not only with our with money, but with our time. I, however, read the ballot measure for Measure J when it was voted on in 2011, and what it says is that the ordinance will provide funding for, blah, 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 police, fire, library, parks, streets, pothole repair, acquisition and development of garages and parking facilities, installation and maintenance of improvements and facilities for the implementation of the Museum Market Plaza specific plan. So I think unless we're, as a group, more creative than I am individually in terms of looking at this definition of what Measure J funds are going for, I would anticipate that we would have a number of people who voted on this issue bring that question to us and ask where in here was this issue as infrastructure. So all I'm saying is I think we need to look at what we voted on and read deeper into it how we can pull Measure J funds out for this purpose.
Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
I'm struggling with the same issue, and that is the intent of what that ordinance was when we went to the voters and asked them to vote on it. Now, I understand it says without limitation. I do get that, which means we can do whatever we want, basically. And so if it's directed that we want to include homelessness as part of the Measure J process, then we can do that. But at this point, we haven't had that direction. And so I think the initial intent was for these items that were mentioned in the ordinance, in the downtown park and public safety, and the things that we have been working on for the last few months to come up with what our recommendations were in the first place. So I am grappling with that. I am struggling with that, to be honest with you.
Commissioner Marshall?
Well, I've also talked to neighbors, and they really, just like me, we want to see the homeless issue addressed, but they also didn't feel like this is what was said was going to be used by Measure J. Although, as Michael just said, it says, it can be expanded. I think maybe it's our job as oversight to be able to interpret as well. But given that, I think at this point in time, I'm more concerned about the process. And I think probably where some of our downfall was is we used to have a subcommittee on council that talked to us and expressed to us what we wanted. And we had representatives that got to meet. This was kind of out of the blue. So personally, I think after 5 years of developing a process, we have to stick with it. And I think it's something maybe we could look at next year. But I think the council subcommittee and our subcommittee need to work that out in advance.
Commissioner Williams, if it's not working, you could...
I don't know, is it working? I think it's working. We just know why. Okay, so I apologize for being late. I made a nice trip down to City Hall before I realized I was in the wrong place. I should have known better. I think I would echo what the rest of the commission members have said, that I don't really think the intent when the voters passed Measure J was that it was to be spent on homeless. Now, having said that, perhaps moving forward, that is what will be identified as the greatest need. But again, this sort of was thrust on us. This was thrust on us sort of out of the blue. We were given a process. We were given ideas about community projects and how that money was to be spent, and I thought was to be basically in our purview and up to our discretion at $1 million a year. So I would probably come down on the side of, I would see that as something we probably would not be wildly enthusiastic about.
Okay. I'm going to state my opinion, but before I do, and maybe I should hold it to later, but I do want to address something you just said. I think that when Councilman Kors just discussed this, it wasn't with relationship to the $1 million in the community projects. It's with relationship to the infrastructure projects.
Sorry, I wasn't here, so I missed it.
Okay. So it's my understanding, and correct me when we have the conversation if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a conversation to be had at this moment about our definition of the $1 million, which I think is very important to protect, because it's the one thing that we have fought for very hard. However, in terms of my opinion, having been on the commission for 5 years, I do feel that while the ordinance has words in it, the idea of not limitation is really important when it comes to what I think is the essence of the concept here, which is public safety and community. And for me, I think both public safety and community does deal with the infrastructure issue, which would be whether it's building a police station, a fire station, or a homeless shelter. I think public safety is tremendously impacted by having this degree of issues with regard to the homeless. I also think that there's a huge cost to the city, and that huge cost to the city was discussed last night, which is something like $40,000 a year per homeless individual not being taken care of and not being given services. So having thought about it, I agree with everyone here who has said that it came as a surprise and that we should consider it within an ongoing conversation. I don't think anybody has asked us at this moment to do anything except to open our minds and our hearts to the conversation. And with that, I think we've made a proposal to the council. They have to discuss it. They have to come back to us with a recommendation, and that's the next step in the process. But we did call this meeting so that we could have some kind of opportunity to give them back a sense of how we feel. If you feel that we haven't given you that, go ahead.
I get sort of where everyone is, and no, and it's not a specific ask to redo recommendations. If council doesn't approve the infrastructure projects and thinks it's a higher priority, as I said at the beginning, I wanted to come back to you. So it was a surprise, right? There was commitments from CVAG that we would have something in place when Roy's closed, and we didn't get a lot of notice on that. And so when it comes to emergency housing, we are in a somewhat crisis situation. And it's not that there's necessarily a ton of money sitting in the general fund, given our budget constraints this year. So ultimately, we have to prioritize. And I do think it's not for, even though I think Measure J would allow it to be spent on services, I do think voters think it was for infrastructure and buildings. And so that is what for me to be comfortable voting for this, if it came to council, would be on the infrastructure building side, not on the provider side. And fortunately, I think we have a good opportunity to get grants on the provider side. And, whenever we're optimistic, we always get a little shot down on this issue, but I do think there is some more hope than usual on the grant front.
Yes.
It does seem to me that if the city were looking, or if the council were looking at a homeless shelter, that then becomes a capital project for the city, and that's something that we do look at. And so I can also see from a safety perspective, public safety perspective, probably more safety for the homeless people than for anybody else, that this could be a window for interpreting what Measure J is all about as well. I also realize, having been here before Roy's, and when under Mayor Kleindienst, there was years of conversation about, in public meetings, about where to locate a shelter. And I would encourage everybody to begin to think about where that might be, and that during that period, that search period, would be an opportunity for everybody to talk about the funding possibilities for it, so that when that happens, we could be ready. And Arlene, you might remember how long, I think it was like 3 or 4 years before the idea of Roy's was established as a community-wide project. But it took a long, long time before a location was identified. So I think that would provide an opportunity for people to really look at how to finance it.
Yeah. And at this point, there are a couple potential locations, and we're getting some bids. And a lot's going to depend on CVAG and, Desert Healthcare District, and that's all moving pretty quickly. So that's why it was more conceptual sort of ask here. Would funding a building, be something the commission would think is worth considering?
A question, we're talking somewhat in, ethereal kinds of things. Should there not be some sort of conceptual proposal?
Well, there would be, yeah.
What I'm saying is, are we talking about, like we have right now, $2.7 million, part of it excess, part of it are $1 million. Do we give you all of that, or do we allocate like we would allocate to any other projects, such as Parks and Rec, such as crosswalks and so on? What would the demand be, or the need be?
Actually, can I?
Please.
Okay. Commissioner Cohen, I think that we're not talking about changing process. This is a conceptual conversation as to whether or not the councilman is trying to get a temperature reading. If they came back to us with a proposal, whether it has to do with having extra money, or perhaps when we have proposed now items for the $2.7 million. And I'm actually going to move to the second topic, because I think that the two are related. In the event that a proposal is presented to us, when it is presented to us, are we open to the conversation with it being conceptually part of infrastructure projects, if there's available money?
and what we've come up with at this point in time, we put on hold until that happens.
No.
No.
The council has to agendize the recommendations that we made. They have to discuss it. They have to either agree to do them or say, no, we would like you to consider some other things in place of it. So nothing's on hold. It has to still go through the normal process. However, I would like to address, and I will address it first, because I have very strong feelings about it in the first place. There is an irony with respect to what the citizens passed the Measure J tax for in terms of the one question that Councilman Kors has brought up. That is something that we have dealt with in the past and are still dealing with in the future. And so the conversation about, is the buzz appropriately part of what Measure J was originally conceived of? We never had the opportunity to discuss it, as Councilman Kors says. Another council actually said to us, we are spending your money on that. Now the conversation is, do we want to? And if we want to, we're going to ask for a staff report
Yes.
on reviewing that.
Yes.
If we say yes, we still think it's appropriate, then we know where we are financially. If we were to say no, we don't think it's appropriate, especially if council asks us and gives us direction to do that, then there's a question of whether there's $1 million that isn't allocated that could potentially be allocated to this area, and that would happen within the future, the next few months. I think that's really where we stand. Okay, so I'll let everyone, I think I summarized the two elements of this discussion and actually why they are related, so we'll do it again. We'll go around, and if anyone has something to say, I'll ask you, and then we'll leave it to Councilman Kors to wrap this up before us.
All right. Councilman Kors mentioned at the previous meeting, I think that the cost per rider on the buzz is $5, something in that vicinity?
I think it's roughly $4.50 per segment. So if you get on, stop somewhere, have coffee, get on again, each segment, a rider gets on and off, is about $4.50.
And it seems that the service is underutilized from what we heard at that meeting. So if we're asking for opinions, I would be happy, even though it looks jaunty to see the buzzes going by, I would be in favor of giving up the bus and using the funds for a more important purpose.
Thank you. Commissioner Cohen?
In the many years that I've worked on different commissions with the city, the homeless concept has been a very strong problem from the very beginning. So if there is a way that we can contribute to that and miss something, and I relay this to the hospitality end of things, is the buzz being used by out-of-town people? Is the buzz a major attraction? Otherwise, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be used in a much more concrete way, and maybe once and for all, handle in a strong way locally the homeless situation. And I hope that the locations are closer than the other side of the 10 freeway.
Thank you. Commissioner Dada?
You all heard my comments at the last meeting, and knowing that I am the hospitality representative here, and we have about 6,000 hotel rooms in our city, and you add to that another 2,000 vacation rental, which is about another 6,000 rooms, so that adds up about 12,000 hotel rooms that are utilized by our guests. The buzz currently is being utilized by far and few of the hotel guests from the Riviera, the Ace, and the Saguaro, which is about 900 rooms. So if you factor in the percentage, really 7-8% of our tourists are using the bus. In my opinion, majority of the usage is by our own residents. So definitely knowing it's $1 million cost, I will highly recommend that those funds could be utilized for much, much better purposes.
Thank you. Commissioner Hammond?
I do agree with the buzz. I would like to see a review by city council of that. I would also like to consider adding the trash service that we're paying on an annual basis. It's not a lot of money, but it does seem odd to have that in our multi-year project column. That this may be more appropriate in some other city department, and my guess is that if we were to really dig down in this, into some of these projects, we would say the same. So I would say yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Okay, yeah, 2 points. Can we go back to the homeless shelter just for a second? And that is, last night at the meeting, we were talking about renting. Is that correct? So the idea of the money, it'll be for build-out of the building?
I mean, one of the facilities is one we can lease from the county for $1 a year. If we're going to do that and spend money on a build-out, we'd actually talk about the county either buying it or giving it to us, if that location were to work out. And then there's a build-out, which is maybe $285,000, if that is what's selected. And there is potential from Desert Healthcare District for the first time for the build-out, so we might not even need it for that. But that would be the appropriate, in my view, Measure J part, is the capital improvement for the building piece. That would be the only part I would think is appropriate.
Okay, on the buzz side, I mean, I haven't seen the data, I don't know the statistics, so I don't know how many people are actually using it. It sounds like not many people are using it, which kind of surprises me, but I don't use it either, so I know what the heck. So if those funds could be used for something smarter, better, get more out of our dollars, I certainly would support that. If we find that people are not using the buzz, then certainly.
Michael, I never said not many people are using it. I said our guest, hotel and vacation rental guest, only, in my opinion, a few % of them utilize the bus.
Well, I'd be interested to find out, okay, that's one piece of it. All the people that are using it. I don't think it's a horrible thing to have something for our citizens either. If they're using it a lot and it's being used and people really appreciate it, then I think that we should think about that. However, if it's not being highly used, period, then that's not a good use of our funds, and we should look elsewhere to put those funds.
Marshall?
You know, having been through this process, and I think most of us that started with Measure J realized it wasn't one of our top priorities. That said, once we got into it, there seemed to be very broad support for it. I know Aftab and Kristen were both on the committee to shape this and come up with a good way. From the beginning, I have to tell you, I just felt like I thought it was a good cause. I thought maybe our share of it was a little high. I also want to say that as I'm chair of the Business Advocacy and Government Affairs for the Chamber of Commerce, so I brought this up at our last meeting, and they expressed strong support for the buzz and actually felt that it was worthwhile. And I remember part of our argument when we first, or consideration when we first funded it, is if you look at all the projects, the streets, the school, there was not a whole lot that we had done for the business community, when yet it's a generator for a lot of the taxes that we get for Measure J. So to me, it was out of all the money was spent, it was appropriate to spend it on buzz. That said, I probably would agree with Christine and Michael that maybe this is something that needs to be reviewed after we've done it. What have we spent? What do we do with the buses now that we've paid them off almost? I think we need more information before I would feel comfortable recommending that we take the money from there. And maybe some alternatives.
Commissioner Williams?
I keep trying to turn it on, it's already on. I like the buzz, and I think the fact that it's used by the local community as well as the tourist community is probably a good thing. And I live up on the north side, and I see people using it all the time. And every time I turn my corner, there's a bus stop right in front of the Wyndham Timeshare Resort, and there's also always 5 or 6 people waiting for the bus on any given night. Having said that, we have approximately $2.7 million and maybe another $900,000 that is discretionary money for next year, and I think it's basically up to the council how you want to spend that money. We are not the decision maker, you're the decision maker, and you made the decision on the buzz, and you can certainly change that if you want. But from a personal perspective, I think that it's very popular in the community, and I think we need to think about that. So there might be a halfway point. Maybe we curtail the buzz or look at when it is used the most. I mean, I went to lunch one day Friday, I guess, last week, and the buzz kept going by, and you know, at noon on Friday, it's not many people on that bus. So maybe we could look at something halfway. That would be my suggestion. And back to the homeless issue, I think that if the council were to dedicate money to infrastructure for homeless, I can see how that would fit into Measure J funding. I do think we could bend the rules and bend the definition and make that work. I don't see why we couldn't.
Yeah.
I'm going to curtail, yes.
Two quick things. One is, would it be possible to charge for the buzz, maybe $2 round trip? Would that offset any of these costs?
What I was told, I think the mayor talked about this last night, the subcommittee, which is him and Councilmember Mills, was that if we charge $1, it would bring in $250,000, right, per segment, of which $200,000, according to the company that runs it, would be needed for them to collect the money, which seemed excessive to me. And so we could look into that. But one of the, obviously, conversations that could be had is there a way to take that $1 and reduce it in half, right? And so that is a conversation that will be discussed by council.
Okay. And my other quick comment is, I moved here from San Francisco, where the homeless problem is in a different order of magnitude, and not every homeless person wants to be in a shelter. So we have mentally ill and, you know, veterans, post-traumatic stress disorder, and people who just, you know, are determined to live on the sidewalk. So it's not going to be a complete solution, is what I'm saying, although it will
Which
help.
there is none. It's, we can make progress, which we are.
Right.
But there are people, right.
Councilperson Vogt actually discussed it last night in saying that it's not something that will ever be resolved, it can only be improved. Okay. I'm going to curtail this conversation because I think that the point is that this was about process and we have it clear. Seems to me that we're going to look for more information. But I do want to say one thing, which I would like to say as chair. I really appreciate your coming to this meeting. You're the first council person in 5 years who has come. And also that the essence of what you're really doing is trying to have a conversation with us and indicating the council is not, you're no longer looking to just tell us what to do, but that you'd like to engage in more discussion. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And we look forward to having more conversation and more direction as well as more information.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I do think that's how it should work. And actually, I think we do it better with sustainability, where we actually meet early in the planning process for the year and we have a lot more feedback. So I think we can come up with a good way to do that. I just want to sort of end, because I'm on the buzz line, so for me it's great, right? It works really well. Sunline does too. It goes right down Palm Canyon. The question, right, and I think I got enough feedback here to sort of share with council, but for me is, you know, infrastructure, you could argue maybe are the trolleys paying, it's hard to argue it's paying the operators to operate the buzz, in my view. So when I look at, and I know you guys didn't bring it to council, so if the buzz should continue, and this is just my opinion, and I'll share it with you now that I've heard from everyone, that should be from the general fund, not necessarily from Measure J, because it doesn't strike me as infrastructure. And that was part of what I was trying to get opinions on. I think I heard that. That doesn't mean the buzz is good or bad, and if you're on the buzz line, it's great. But, you know, what is it? It's 1% of our general fund. So it's a big expense, right, that we spend on it. It's more than we spend on every grant we give for economic incentives, for social services, and for events in the city. So it's a big ticket item, and so I think getting analysis, which is what we're trying to collect right now, and having Measure J give input to council after you review it is sort of what I would like. And then I think council needs to review it and make a decision on what's appropriate and what isn't moving forward. So I really appreciate the time. I know you have a couple people who are going to actually share some of the efforts they're involved in regarding affordable housing, homeless individuals here. And so I unfortunately can't stay because I'm co-chairing an event I have to go to, but I really do appreciate the time. And we will talk about maybe at the next meeting, bring back some communication ideas on working together.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It's okay. We're going to move to public comment now. We just delayed it. So that's fine. Okay. So now I am going to move to public comment, and we'll read the instructions. I don't think, do we have a timer? Can you time for us? Okay. Okay, so public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Measure J Commission on agenda items and items of general interest with the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Although the Measure J Commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. So we'll call you up in order of being the cards filled out.
I believe I saw David. Oh, she's going to go.
David Brinkman? Is that? Ariana, you feel comfortable? You feel comfortable saying it's over? Timer?
Yeah.
Oh, we have a timer. Okay. Oh, okay.
My name is do I have to talk in this? Okay. My name is Arlene Rosenthal.
Yes.
Do you want me to talk? Okay.
Yeah, in other words,
Okay. My name is Arlene Rosenthal, and I am the president of the Well in the Desert, and I have been for going on 14 years. And I was here to get information, and it's wonderful. I have so much regard and respect for all of you. I just didn't know that the kind of thing that was involved in Measure J. And I remember asking 5 years ago when you started, asking somebody, I think it was Mayor Moon, when he came on, I said, is there any way that we could have some funding to help the Well in the Desert? And he said, no, that's not what we're all about. So then Councilman Coors asked me to be here. And before I say one thing about infrastructure, Commissioner Dada, we have a program called Operation Well Assist. I will give you our administrator's name and number. You call him, and they will handle the people that are disturbing the Hilton. And that's part of our program to bring them to us for services, referrals, a hot meal, and so that business can thrive. Because we're all in favor of business thriving in Palm Springs. So next week at Rotary, I'll bring you the information, okay? I listened, and I have high regard for everything you said. And it's amazing because you talked about infrastructure and how better can it be but to allow the city to have some money to devote to that. I've been working with Councilman Coors and the city for some time on how we move forward in a more positive manner in resolving our issues. The issues will never be completely resolved. Homelessness is here to stay with us. And I said last night, we do not know why people fall. Why do they fall through the cracks? I had a millionaire friend, she ended up homeless. So we don't know, but the Well in the Desert helps to lift people back up. Infrastructure is safety. If you have people in town that are potentially emotionally dangerous, that will scare the people, that's infrastructure. You need a place for them to go. And right now, we are working on a place that will be a cool center and where we can bring people from downtown. And we're working on a place that actually would draw people away from the downtown. So when it comes to infrastructure and bettering downtown and bettering the city, I think the city really has an answer to it. And just want you to think about it. Okay, stop. Thank you very, am I done, Leo? Okay, thank you very much.
A+.
David?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thanks for allowing me to come and speak to you today. I'm the CEO of Desert AIDS Project, and I've served in that role for the last 11 years. Since 2012, Desert AIDS Project has served all low-income residents. We became what's called a federally qualified health center, and so people having HIV is no longer a qualification for our medical home. Part of that is housing people. We house 80 families and individuals on our campus today at our Vista Sunrise housing facility. We are their doctors, we're their psychiatrists, we are their dentists, we are their food provider, we provide wraparound services to them. Desert AIDS Project in December closed escrow on a vacant parcel of land adjacent to our property, and just today we went to escrow into another parcel of land adjacent to our property. We have a design to develop another 61 units for low-income people who are residents of our community. Rent starts at $249 a month. I think if you look at our current project that's been housing people since 2007, those 80 families, it is a huge success story for Palm Springs. We've done a great job of stabilizing 80 individuals and families in our facility. The big challenge today is tax credits. Tax credits is how you normally finance capital and infrastructure to developing more housing. With the change in the presidential administration, we've had a decrease in value in tax credits. So we are able to raise 50% of the funding to develop the next 61 units, but we need infrastructure and capital investment from our community in which to do so. Of course, I've talked to all the national foundations about funding our work, and all of them have asked me, what has your city invested so far in solving the homeless issue specific to this project? And so far, Desert AIDS Project doesn't have an answer. So thank you all for the opportunity to come and talk to you about this project. If I'm invited back sometime, I'd be happy to show you a PowerPoint presentation of the design of it and answer any questions. I've got 52 seconds. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for...
Christian?
All right, I can hardly stay in my chair. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. I'm with Street Life Project Homeless Outreach. We serve about 300 homeless valley-wide. And in fact, tonight we have outreach. We provide food, clothing, toiletries, necessities, but more than that, love and mentorship and guidance. And we've been researching solutions for the longest time because our biggest hurdle is a place for them to go. We actually have been researching tiny home communities. We've been looking at, like, what is Seattle doing? What is Portland doing? What are these communities doing that have chronic homeless? Shelters aren't serving the chronic homeless. That's why I lived in Seattle. It was homeless everywhere. They've solved the problem. They've spent over $250 million in solving this problem in the research and development of these programs. So we actually toured Portland, Seattle, and besides pulling the case studies, which is about that thick, we actually went to the camps themselves. We got the intake packets, we got the sign-in, sign-out sheets. We learned how they functioned and how they're managed. They're actually self-managed, and people are voted into certain positions in the camp. And it's been amazing success. Actually, people feel empowered now because they're managing the camp. They're keeping it clean. They each take turn at the security desk. They're responsible for a community point for every 2 weeks where they go out and serve the community. That could be picking up trash. It could be painting a school. It could be doing everything, but they're connecting with the community. There's also a case manager on site. And each case on each site, actually I'm proposing 2 locations here in Palm Springs, actually 6 locations valley-wide. We've we've partnered with Caltrans, and we've been working with them for a long time because we know the people. So when they're going and displacing people, they send us in there to talk to them about it. And we've been working on this relationship, and about 3 weeks ago, we got the thumbs up to move forward on parcels of land throughout Coachella Valley that they'll provide us for free for these tiny home communities. They have seen the details in our plan, and they're going for it. We've been, this is kind of hard because 3 minutes is really tough. What I'm requesting from you guys is a real, genuine, hardcore presentation, and let's solve the problems for the chronic homeless, the mentally ill, the people that are out there. We're going to centralize our services. We're going to get them out of the hotels, out in front of the restaurants, and we're going to centralize our service efforts. We're going to have mental health professionals coming and serving these communities. We have healthcare providers that are going to provide people assistance that have AIDS, hepatitis. A lot of people have MRSA, which is very prevalent, but they're willing to come on a weekly basis and provide these services, along with job training is what we do that too. But it's a very functional program, and it only costs $1 million, and we could literally put a roof over every single person's head. Oh, man, it's too short. But anyways, thank you guys. Hopefully you guys give us an opportunity to really share it with you, because it will open your eyes to a whole new process. These aren't homes like what you see on HGTV. They're 120 square foot homes. They have a centralized community center, a place where they can go to the restroom, where they can get on the computer, look for jobs, and it works. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I've read about
Blair?
it. I've read about it.
He talks really, really fast. So, my name is Blair Wagner. I'm also with Street Life Project. We actually have an outreach today at 6 o'clock, starting at Sunrise Park. If any of you guys want to come, can you hear me? No. I'm sorry. I'm on my tiptoes.
Tilt it down. There you go.
Okay. That better? Okay. So, Mr. Vogel, you went over kind of the cost per year, the cost of homelessness to keep, not do anything and have people on the streets. In our proposal, which is pretty lengthy and very detailed, we did a range of $30,000 to $50,000 per person per year. That's kind of the national average on a scale. So I did figures based off of the $30,000 amount, which is taking the lowest end. Just in Palm Springs, which the homeless count, now that's point in time from Riverside, which we know that that's not accounting for everybody. There's no way that they can possibly account for that. So based on the point in time counts, they are showing 138 homeless in Palm Springs alone. The count for Coachella Valley-wide, going from Desert Hot Springs all the way out to Coachella, was 452. In 2016, the count was 305, so you can see the dramatic increase. So if we're talking just Palm Springs, based on that $30,000 per year, and that's anything from emergency room visits, the police, fire, all of your emergency providers that are taking into account the homeless, based on that figure, Palm Springs, it's going to cost $4,140,000 to cover the 138 people. So that's just per year in 1 year, and we can see that the homeless count is going up. I think the biggest thing about our proposal is that we're not setting all the burden on one city. We're actually asking that every city throughout our Coachella Valley work together and take care of the homeless that are accounted for in their city, because we see a lot of homeless dumping where even from people coming in from Banning and Beaumont that are just being dumped out here at Desert Regional, and they know nobody. They don't even know where they are half the time. So that's the biggest issue. So it's really holding every city accountable for our people. And a lot of these people are residents, and they've been here and worked. And we have a ton of animal shelters. We don't have enough services for homeless. So we're not asking for another shelter. We're asking to look at an actual proven and viable solution that's working in much bigger cities like Ms. Bixson mentioned in San Francisco. So thank you so much for your time.
At the end? Okay. I'm cognizant of the fact that this is an additional meeting, and I'm concerned about time. The reason that we put this meeting into place was to respond in the event that there were any discussion topics at the joint meeting, and I think we've done that. Okay, we've made our proposal to the City Council, and as far as my understanding is concerned, this is a bit of a call and response. We've had our conversation with Councilman Coors. He has a sense of what happened here, and the next step is to wait for the council to discuss this. I recommend and ask each of the commissioners to watch the council agenda, and when this comes up, it would be a good idea. Last year, I was present in order to answer any questions. We're not really done. We made the presentation, but when they discuss our recommendations, it's totally possible for us to be at that meeting and to converse and to give further response. But at this point, it's really a matter of just waiting for direction, okay? And I would say that that's basically was the point of this meeting. We do have these two other agenda items, which is before we get to new business, the Finance Director's report and the Measure J projects report. Do either of you feel that there's something important that you would like to say? We just put them on there because I didn't really think of taking them off.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take 30 seconds.
Okay.
Following the direction of the
Can't hear you.
following the direction of the commission from the last meeting, I broke out the downtown project / park into 2 lines. You'll see that reflected on your report. And pleased to report that we've now hit the $60 million level on total Measure J revenues over the last 5 years. With that, I'd also, with my great pleasure, I'd like to introduce my new friend, Tom Garcia. He's the new Director of Engineering. He's not Marcus Bull. And I just wanted you to say hello to him. Well, that's it.
Thank you. And you're here to say hello. Do you have I asked you earlier, but if you have some...
Very briefly,
Yes.
I do have an update on the police station. As you know, the City Council voted to reject all bids and authorize staff to solicit proposals. We are planning to do that within the next month, so the project will go out to bid again
Can't
in
hear
June.
you.
We can't hear you over here.
I'm sorry, is that better?
No,
No.
Talk right into it.
that's good.
We'll get them hearing aids.
Very close.
I can hear.
Okay,
There you go.
I'll speak up then. As you are aware, the City Council rejected all bids for the police station project. They authorized staff to go out and solicit proposals. We plan on doing that in the next month. That's the update. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to new business. Yes?
We don't get an opportunity to
Oh,
ask
yes, you do.
questions?
Yes, you do. I'm sorry.
That's subject.
I was hoping you wouldn't, but you do have an opportunity.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Yes, I do have a question.
She's finished.
Tom, what are the unfinished projects from our very first go-around? And I don't expect an answer. I'm just asking the question so that next time we meet, we might have a report.
Actually, I have a list of those projects.
No,
I need to
Tom, we
review
don't
them.
need that.
You don't, and you don't need to do that. It's
Thank you.
not, but next month, could we just get a list of those projects that are not yet completed?
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be in that
$200
format.
million.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question.
Yes?
Can you tell me when that entry sign on the south end on East Palm Canyon is going to be repaired, and how does that get paid for?
Oh, don't repair it.
Come on.
I'm just curious, because we paid for that and it got hit.
Oh,
and-
but it's
This
piece
is not
of-
the meeting.
If you're speaking of the one that got hit,
That's what.
Yes.
we
How
have a
many
project that's going out to, it's going to be under an existing paving project that's going to relocate the median that the new sign will be placed in. The new sign won't be placed as part of the change order for the pavement project. It'll be placed, but that pavement project will relocate all the utilities to the new median.
Okay.
And raise it, please?
The design of the new sign hasn't been completed yet.
I know, we never
I'm going to take you off the hook here and move on. Okay, so you'll notice that the next meeting and the last meeting of the year is June 15th. Hopefully, the council will discuss our recommendations before that. If they don't, then we'll see what happens in terms of the necessity to discuss anything after that. However, I did want to bring up something, and this is something that I am personally bringing up here, which has to do with the timeline for the election of new officers. Okay? I'd like to point out that after 5 years, there are 2 commissioners who are terming out, Commissioner Cohen and Commissioner Dada. It's also my understanding that Commissioner Heritage, thank you. I was going to say Hamilton. Mr. Commissioner Heritage is not going to seek a new term, which means there are 3 commissioners who have participated for a minimum of 2 years or a maximum of 5 years in the business of the commission. Okay? It's possible that the council will replace those commissioners, and it's possible that they won't. But in any event, it is my feeling, personally, that commissioners who have never been a part of this commission really are not necessarily the right people to vote for the leadership of the commission, particularly since now the commission is discussing some very important new items that has to do with a lot of the past. I also feel that the commissioners who are leaving should be given the opportunity to participate in the ongoing direction and not have their intelligence and all of the things that they have contributed over these years not be part of the discussion of leadership, regardless of who is that person who's going to lead. So I'm going to recommend and ask for discussion with respect to moving the election to the next meeting. Let me finish, I'll let you go. Moving the election to the next meeting so that either the outgoing commissioners have a chance to, well, so that they have a chance to weigh in on the future of this commission. Yes, Mr. You can go first.
Well, I don't know if you need a motion, but I will move that we have elections in June, because I feel strongly about that too. And I'm guessing our 2 newest members that are here probably have learned a lot over the last year, but I can guarantee you those of us who have been here for a while probably look back and there was significant decisions that were made that we wish that we had had a little bit more exposure to. So I think it would be a lot to ask to have 3 new members come on and not know what it's all about. So I make the motion that we have our elections in June.
Second.
Can I ask a question? Haven't we traditionally done it at the September meeting?
Yes, we have, except
Okay.
that, and we did it in the September meeting traditionally because, we started in September. Our first meeting was in September. Other commissions do it in July, but I am making this particular point that while it's been tradition, there's a difference here, especially after 5 years.
Well, I'd just like to give a contrasting opinion, and that is, if I were a brand-new commissioner coming on this commission and the officers and essentially the leadership was already in place, I would feel like that I was not part of that decision. I personally think it should be in September when the new commissioners are in place.
Well, speaking as one of the newer members, I respectfully kind of disagree with that. I think that the rest of you that have been on this commission for a very long time understand the process. You understand the issues. You don't coming in from the outside. You know, you can read about it in the Desert Sun, all these types of things, but you don't really get it until you're sitting in this chair. And so I think it'd be really hard for someone to come in September for the first day that they're actually a member of this commission and vote on who they think ought to be chair or vice chair. I think that would be actually unfair to them in a way, because they can't do it and feel good about themselves, I don't think. So
And-
that just as a new member, that's one view.
And Michael, I concur with you.
That's fine, I just disagree. We can disagree and be
Yes,
friends.
of course.
And
Commissioner Hammond?
I would say that based on our recent experience, there's no guarantee that replacement commissioners will be selected by September. So you know,
Right.
how long, how
Again-
long do we wait?
Right,
So-
well, we wouldn't be waiting, but again, I'm not sure that the commissioners who are terming out are going to return. It's their option to sit through or not, but I would like to basically suggest, and I think we have a motion on the floor, so let's vote on the motion. So all those, you want to, well, the motion's basically, I can repeat it, to have our elections in July.
Yes.
June 15th.
So all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion is carried.
Could somebody be opposed, maybe?
Yes, you can. All those opposed? I'm sorry, I'm still learning the process, which is part of the reason why I think people should be here. Yes, okay,
I'm opposed, okay.
thank you. Okay, so now we have another moment of public comment, but it's for public comment that hasn't happened before, so, okay. Staff member comments? Staff member comments? No? Commissioner member comments?
I want a full hour and a half report from you, Tom, right now. I'm just kidding.
Joking.
Yes, trust me, he's kidding.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
Okay, the meeting's
Do we
adjourned.
have a choice?